Ciao! Welcome back to Benchwarmer Diaries and welcome to my World Cup group stage roundup. In today's video, I'll be going through the various groups A to H and looking at some of the best players, teams and moments from the first 48 games of this tournament. First of all, I'll be going through the final standings in each group and looking at the teams who are going into the round of 16 and those who are going back home. Then I will talk about the teams and players who surprised me as well as those who disappointed me the most, followed by a list that I called Zeros to Heroes, which you'll understand the reason behind it later. And last but not least, my predictions for the knockout stages of the World Cup. So let's get right into it. In Group A, the Netherlands managed to take home first place on 7 points, followed by Senegal, who clinched second, beating Ecuador on the final match day. And of course that means Qatar in fourth, which to be honest everyone kind of expected. Moving on to Group B, England finished in first after thrashing Iran on the first match day, then drawing with the USA and finally winning with Wales. In second place we have the US, who drew their first game with Wales, drew their second with England and managed to beat Iran on the final match to take home second place and book their ticket into the round of 16. Then of course we have Iran, who managed to beat Wales but unfortunately lost to both England and the US, so they go back home in 3 points. And last of course Wales, who managed to take home only 1 point after drawing 1-1 with the US on the first match. Now let's hope they don't have to wait for another World Cup for this long. And then moving on to Group C, where Argentina managed to clinch first place on 6 points after a very rough first game as they lost 2-1 to Saudi Arabia. But then they managed to beat both Mexico and Poland to secure them first place and an easier opponent in the round of 16. And in second place, Poland managed to beat out Mexico only thanks to goal difference, which leaves Saudi Arabia in fourth on 3 points, who after beating Argentina incredibly on the first match day were not able to replicate a good enough performance against both Poland and Mexico. Next up, Group D, which was a very shocking group for me. In first place, France managed to break the World Cup winners' curse as they took home 2 victories against Denmark and Australia, qualifying first and therefore into the round of 16. And in second place, with one of the most surprising results of the tournament so far, Australia managed to beat both Denmark and Tunisia to clinch second place with 6 points, the same as France, and qualify for the round of 16 as well. And so third place went to Tunisia and fourth place went to Denmark, who definitely underperformed at this World Cup. Similarly, we saw a lot of surprises in Group E, where Japan managed to beat both Spain and Germany. Who knows how they lost to Costa Rica, but that was enough for them to top the group with 6 points. Behind them, both Spain and Germany finished on 4 points, but Spain managed to take home second place thanks to their bigger goal difference. And of course, that leaves Costa Rica in last, who, as I said, managed to beat Japan, so they at least took home 3 points, but that wasn't enough. However, there was a moment, there were 3 minutes, where Japan was beating Spain and Costa Rica was beating Germany, where I believe everyone wanted both games to finish, as that would have seen Japan first and Costa Rica second, with Spain and Germany both knocked out of the World Cup at the group stages, which would have been insane. And moving on to Group F, Morocco took first place on 7 points, followed by Croatia on 5, then a very disappointing Belgian team on 4, and lastly Canada on 0, unfortunately. Up next, Group G saw Brazil, one of the favorites for this World Cup, finish on 6 points, which was quite a surprise because I think many people expected them to win all 3 games. But they were only able to beat a Serbian team who finished last on 1 point and the Swiss, who then ended up taking second place from Cameroon. And finally, in Group H, we saw Portugal take first place on 6 points, ahead of South Korea on 4, as well as Uruguay, who only got knocked out as they scored fewer goals than South Korea. And of course, Ghana finished last. Moving on to the team that surprised the most at this tournament so far, obviously we have to consider Saudi Arabia, as they probably delivered one of the biggest upsets in World Cup history as they beat Argentina 2-1 on the opening match day. But we could also consider Japan, who managed to beat both Germany and Spain in their group, as I said, and are clearly now one of the underdog favorites for this tournament. However, there is one team that surprised me more than any other so far, and that is because before the start of the tournament I had no expectations for them whatsoever, and that team is Australia. The Socceroos managed to finish with the same points as France as they beat both Tunisia and Denmark to clinch second place. Now they're gonna be up against Argentina in the round of 16, and who knows, let's see if they'll be able to pull off another World Cup upset. On to the team that has disappointed me the most at this tournament, and I have to be honest, I was quite torn between two teams. However, I'm most disappointed by Denmark. I expected Denmark to be one of the dark horses for this tournament, especially after their performance at the Euros last year, where they played like a very strong, tight-knit team. And now, onto a more positive note again, and I'll talk about some of the players who have surprised me the most so far at this tournament. One of them is one of the leading goal scorers at this tournament so far, and that is Gakpo. Gakpo is the player who's been carrying the Netherlands so far, and he's the one who's doing the job that players like De Jong and Depay were expected to be doing. Another player who surprised me is Gavi, who, although people might say he's already experienced, he's been playing top European level football already, he is still only born in 2004, which makes him 18, and with his goal against Costa Rica, he became the second youngest goal scorer ever at a World Cup after Pelé. A little bit older than Gavi, but still very young and at the start of their careers. Three more players who have surprised me a lot so far have been Mohamed Kudus, Gvardiol and Tyler Adams. Mohamed Kudus is one of Ghana's most promising talents. Gvardiol will be the main man in Croatia's defense in the future. And Tyler Adams, who at only 23 is this World Cup's youngest captain, is already playing with so much confidence, and it feels like he's got so much more experience than he actually does. Three older and more experienced players who have stepped up to the big occasion and surprised me are Bruno Fernandes, Ziyech and Szczesny. Bruno Fernandes has been playing pretty well, and with 2 goals and 2 assists, it's safe to say that now that Ronaldo can't do it alone anymore, he is the one who is somewhat carrying Portugal. Ziyech, on the other hand, is the main man for a very strong, united Moroccan team as he scored 1 goal and 1 assist, while Szczesny is definitely the man to thank for Poland's qualification into the round of 16. Lastly, I want to mention 2 players who have already been knocked out of the tournament, but definitely deserve a shout as one of the best players so far. One is Aboubakar, who scored 2 goals at this tournament, one of which came in Cameroon's first ever win against Brazil. And the other is Ener Valencia, who scored 3 goals and did his best to try and carry Ecuador past the group stages, but unfortunately failed. On the other hand, there are just 3 main players who have disappointed me the most. And they are Kevin De Bruyne, Romelu Lukaku and Federico Valverde. Valverde is already one of my favorite players in the world at the moment, and I think that he will be one of the world's best for quite some time. However, with 3 games played, 0 goals and 0 assists to his name, especially after the form he's been for Real Madrid in recent times, I'm just quite disappointed that he hasn't been able to not just replicate it, but at least show some of his skill at this World Cup. And just like him, Kevin De Bruyne is also leaving Qatar with 0 goals scored and 0 assists provided. And I think that KDB's performance at this World Cup really reflects that of Belgium as a whole team, as they came into this tournament with a lot of expectations and a lot of talent. However, none of them delivered. And neither did Romelu Lukaku, who only played approximately 60 minutes at this World Cup. And I think that, as most of you have seen or at least heard of, he missed 4 sitters against Croatia, which could have brought Belgium through into the round of 16. And now, on to Zeros to Heroes, the segment that I mentioned at the start of the video, where I'll be ranking some of the worst and best moments and performances that we saw from this World Cup's group stage from 0 to 10. If you've gotten this far in the video, I think you already know who is the team that has disappointed me the most in the tournament, as I've talked about them quite a few times already, and that is Denmark. With just 1 point earned at this World Cup after a draw with Tunisia, I think that this tournament will go down as a pretty big failure for fans, players and staff. So, Denmark are my zeros for the 2022 World Cup group stages. And with a rating of 1, I'm gonna give it to Belgium. To be honest, I was quite undecided as to who to give 0 and 1 to, but the reason why I gave 0 to Denmark and 1 to Belgium is because I had much greater expectations from the Danes. As for Belgium, as you probably all know, they didn't have the best atmosphere in the locker room, and with just 1 goal scored, I think it's pretty safe to say that Belgium's golden generation is well and truly finished. On to the 3rd worst rating in this leaderboard, a 2, this one definitely belongs to Qatar. Even before the tournament started, regardless of their investments in infrastructure and the 5 months of training camp they had, I didn't expect Qatar to do well at all. For that reason, they're not at the very bottom of my ratings, but just above. And also, they're only the second ever host nation to be eliminated from the group stages of a World Cup, so the two make sense, right? Slightly moving up and getting a rating of 3 is Messi and his penalties on the big stage with Argentina. With his penalty miss against Poland, Messi has now definitely set an unwanted record, as he's the first player ever to miss 2 penalties at a World Cup. The reason why I've given him a 3 is because Messi's tally of missed penalties with Argentina on the big stage is now up to 3, with 2 penalties missed at the World Cup and 1 in the 2016 final of the Copa America. As we're getting closer to the more positive rating, there is still a 4 to be handed out, and that goes to Germany. They have now been eliminated from the group stages of a World Cup for the second consecutive time, and although they have very young, talented players like Gnabry, Musiala, Kimmich and Havertz, I think it's time for this team to have a rebuild, especially because they need to start looking for worthy replacements for their aging players like Müller, Gundogan and Manuel Neuer. Next up, 5 goes to Cristiano Ronaldo for becoming the first player ever to score in 5 different World Cups. Not just that, after having had a rough start to the season, CR7 looks to be back in a good mood again, as always when he plays for Portugal to be fair, but he also looks like in good shape after he had 2 decent performances against Ghana and Uruguay. Above that, 6, in my opinion, goes to Gakpo and PSV's future finances. As I've already mentioned, Gakpo's performances and his 3 goals in 3 games are proving that he is one of the best young players in the world and that he can do it on the biggest stage of all, and not just at PSV. Other than Cristiano Ronaldo, I think that Gakpo will be the center of attention during the next transfer window, and I'm sure that PSV will not let him go for cheap. Up next, I have to rate Morocco's group stage run as 7. They finished first in a group which had the runners-up and the third best team from the 2018 World Cup, and not only that, but they are also one of the few teams who still hasn't lost a game in this World Cup. And having made it to the round of 16, they have now equaled Morocco's all-time best World Cup performance, and who knows, with the players and team spirit they have, they might even take it one step further. Now we're left with the podium spots, but before I get into my top 3, I want to give a shout out to South Korea. They became the second Asian team to qualify for the round of 16 at this World Cup, as they finished second in the group above Uruguay thanks to their 2-1 win over Portugal on the final match day. Onto the podium spots now, and with a rating of 8, I have to give it to Saudi Arabia's win over Argentina. I think I've talked enough about this match already, so I won't go too much into detail about it, but the reason why I'm giving Saudi Arabia only an 8 is because they failed to get a result in the 2 following games. However, even though they did get knocked out of the tournament, I definitely think they deserve credit for causing one of the biggest upsets in World Cup history. And in at second place, rating their World Cup so far a 9, I'm going for Australia. 16 years after reaching the round of 16 the last time, the Socceroos managed to equal that feat once again. And this time I think this was one of the biggest upsets of the tournament so far, as they beat out 2 teams, Tunisia and Denmark, who on paper have much better teams than them. However, that just goes to show that on paper means nothing in football, and especially at the World Cup, you are not given anything and you have to deserve it all. And so, in my opinion, the heroes of the 2022 World Cup so far are Japan. As I already said in this video, they caused 2 major upsets by beating Spain and Germany, who in my opinion were 2 favorites coming into this World Cup, and so there is no doubt in my mind that they're the most surprising team we've seen so far. However, my heroes are not just the team and the players themselves, it's also the Japanese fans, who, as we know, are some of the most kind and genuine people around, and as you all saw, they even stay behind and help clean up the stadiums after the games. As I'm now curious to see what Japan can do against Croatia in the round of 16, this leads us onto the final part of the video, my predictions for the knockout stages. Alright, let's run through these predictions then. In game 1, it's going to be the Netherlands versus the USA, and I think it'll go the way of the Dutch and they'll probably win 2 or 3-1. In game 2, it's going to be Argentina versus Australia, and to be honest, I think it's going to be a tougher game than people expect for Argentina, but they should be able to come out on top. In game 3, like I was saying, we have Japan, the underdogs of this year's tournament, and I think they can keep going, so I expect Japan to beat Croatia in this one. And on the final game, on the left-hand side of the bracket, it's going to be Brazil versus South Korea, and I think that's where the road ends for Heung-min Son, as Brazil should win quite comfortably. On the right hand side, the first game we'll see is England versus Senegal, and like I said in my original predictions video, if Senegal still had Sadio Mane, I think they could have a chance, but without him, I just think England have much more firepower up front, and to be fair, they have been playing pretty well so far. The second game is going to be France versus Poland, and if both teams play like they have played so far, I just don't think there is a way through for Poland into the quarterfinals, so it's going to be France on this one. And the third game is going to be Morocco versus Spain, and I think this is going to be a very fun game as Morocco is a very fearless team, and of course Spain is such a talented one that we'll see quite a bit of fireworks, but I just think that Spain will edge it. And the last game of the round of 16 is going to be Portugal versus Switzerland, and unfortunately for my Swiss compatriots, I think that's going to be the end of the road for them and Portugal will go into the quarterfinals. So let's get into the quarterfinals, where the first game is going to be the Netherlands versus Argentina, and in my opinion both teams haven't been playing as well as they could so far in this tournament, so it's going to be a game of who can take advantage of their chances the most, and I think it'll be the Netherlands. As for the second game, I think it's going to be Japan versus Brazil. However, unfortunately, in my opinion, it's going to be the end of the Japanese dream as Brazil have too good of a team, and I would be surprised if they don't at least reach the semifinals this year. And on to England versus France, which I think will be one of the most fun games this tournament, if it was to happen of course, because I think they are two very attacking teams, so I think we'll see quite a few goals, and it might even go into extra time, but I just think England will edge it. And on to Spain versus Portugal, the Battle of the Iberian Peninsula. I don't know why, but I have a feeling that this game might come down to a moment of magic by one individual player, and I think that's going to be a Portuguese one. This means that we'll see the Netherlands play versus Brazil and England play versus Portugal in the two semi-finals. And if you saw my original predictions video, you would know that I predicted Brazil and Portugal to reach the final, so I'm gonna stick with that. As for the two finalists, Brazil and Portugal, I think they can both still improve on their current form as they haven't been very convincing during the group stages, but I just think that Brazil have a greater margin of improvement, so I'm gonna pick the Seleção to win the World Cup in front of Ronaldo's Portugal. So that's it from your favorite bench warmer on YouTube for now. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to click the like button, comment down below what you thought about it, and hit that subscribe button so you won't miss an upload. Thank you for watching.